I've seen winter crises come and go over many, many years as a reporter. I don't remember one quite like this in the NHS. 55,000 operations cancelled in a single month, a return to mixed-sex wards and all the rest of it. Can you remember when the crisis was as bad as this?
Well, look, if we look at what has happened in the NHS and what is happening in the NHS, of course, as you say, there are winter pressures every year.
But not like this. This is worse, isn't it?
The NHS has actually been better prepared for this winter pressures than it has been before. You mentioned operations being postponed. That was part of the plan. Of course, we want to ensure that those operations can be reinstated as soon as possible, but it's about making sure that those who most urgently need care are able to get that treatment when they need it. But what I also know, and I visited Frimley Park Hospital only a few days ago. What I also know is that our NHS staff have been doing a fantastic job. They do that day in and day out, but they have been working really hard over this time of winter pressure and really delivering for people and doing a fantastic job.
Sure, but Prime Minister, you say there's a plan. Let me tell you about Leah Butler-Smith, who was in an ambulance in a hospital outside Essex with her mother, who was having a stroke. They were in the ambulance for an hour, and they then went into the hospital for a further 4 hours before they saw a doctor. Her mother was going in and out of consciousness. If I'd been waiting for 5 hours before I'd seen a doctor after my stroke, I would not be here talking to you. This is about life and death, and up and down the country, people are having horrendous experiences of the NHS. Whether you say there's a plan or not, there is a real problem. What would you say to Leah Butler-Smith and her mother?
Well, obviously, you've raised an individual case with me, which I haven't seen the details of, and I recognise that people have concerns if they have experience of that sort. If we look at what is happening across the NHS, what we see is that actually the NHS is delivering for more people, it is treating more people, and more people are being seen within the 4 hours every day than has been in a few years ago. But of course, nothing's perfect, and there is more for us to do. We have planned for the winter pressures this year. We did put some more money in, and there has been planning, and hospitals have been dealing with it in different ways. As I say, when I met staff at Frimley Park, they were very clear about about what they'd been doing, and I saw the dedication of our NHS staff, which is so important to us all.
But given what's happened, you have apologised. What have you said sorry for?
What I said was that, of course, as we've seen, some operations have been postponed and some people have been delayed in being admitted to hospital. Now, if you look across the NHS, experience is different. Experience is different from hospital to hospital as to what is happening. There are some hospitals where very few operations have been cancelled.
And there are some where the bed occupancy is 99.9%, yes, way above what is considered to be safe.
And what we need to do is to ensure that in addition to the work that we're doing for putting extra funding into the NHS, that we are working to see where it is the case that hospitals have been perhaps being able to cope better than others. What is it that's enabled them to do that? What can we learn from this for the future?
You say you've put the money in, but according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, this is the tightest spending squeeze in the history of the NHS. Are you saying sorry for that?
Yeah. We have put extra money into the NHS. We have been doing that, year in and year out.
Not nearly enough, clearly.
Year in and year out, we look at the funding for the National Health Service. And what we've done is consistently, where we felt that it did need more funding, we have put more funding into it. So we put some extra money in for the coping with the winter pressures. We've also, of course, in the budget in November, announced that for the next couple of years there will be extra money, further money, going into the National Health Service. So we look at what is needed and we recognise that. We also need to ensure that we're seeing, across the whole of the NHS, the best possible practice. We should be proud of the fact that our NHS has been named as the safest and best healthcare system in the world. Is there more we can do? Yes, of course there is. And that's what the government will be doing.
The tightest funding squeeze in the history of the NHS, £6 billion out of the social care budget since 2010, which is why there are so many people in hospital beds at the moment, and an NHS reorganisation under Andrew Lansley, described by your own former advisor, Nick Timothy, as being a disaster, creating bureaucracy and destroying accountability. Surely those are the things you should be apologising for.
Well, if you look at the social care system, we have recognised the pressure that is put on the NHS and the increased pressure on the social care system because of the ageing population.
But you haven't done anything about it, I'm sorry.
Well, yes, we have done something about it, Andrew. I'm sorry, you're wrong in that.
We have put extra funding into the social care system, and we have worked with hospitals and with local authorities to identify how we can reduce those delayed discharges, i.e. patients being kept in hospital when they shouldn't be.
You take £6 billion out from the NHS, from the local authorities, and you put a small amount of money back in. That is not solving the problem. That is putting a small sticking plaster on a wound that you have created.
Yeah. The social care, I've always said, and I've said for some time now, that if we look at the social care system, we need to identify that there's a short-term answer, there's a medium-term answer and a longer-term answer. Short-term, we've put extra money in. Medium-term, we need to ensure that best practice is being undertaken across the whole of the system.